AI for okay. I just had the recording started, so I'll just start that again. Welcome everyone to the CES webinar of Navigating AI for Independent Consultants. This is our inaugural event for the independent consulting community of interest. I am one of the co-facilitators. My name is Dr. Claire Reynolds, and I am co-chairing with Dr. Gail Barrington. Quickly introduce myself. I'm coming to you from the unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. I am a program evaluator for the Ottawa Carleton District School Board. And I am also on the working group of ICCI. So quick introduction to the webinar before we get started. The aim of the webinar is to share ways AI can be used by independent consultants in program evaluation. Now we have 5 speakers today who are not necessarily experts in AI, but are using AI actively in their work to varying degrees. And they're going to be sharing their experiences and some tips with you today. One of our speakers, unfortunately, couldn't be here because of a family conflict, but she was able to record her contribution for us today. So I will be switching from the slides to the video when it's time. So just a few notes about the setup today. So for efficiency's sake, each speaker will be introducing themselves, and we will save all the questions until the end. We do have the Q&A feature open for you, so you can put your comments in there in English or French, and we will get to those at the end. We've put aside some time to get to all the questions, and we do have the chat feature open for if you want to share any ways you use AI in your work that might be different than what our speakers share with you today. And feel free to get into the details of that, because we really want this to be a learning experience for everyone. And we also will be sharing the slides with you as well. So that we will send those to you afterwards. So before we jump into the world of AI, my co-chair, who is also the co-chair of ICCI, Dr. Gail Barrington, will share more about ICCI with you. Take it away, Gail.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It's so exciting. This is our inaugural event, and we're very keen to get going. It's taken us a year to get to this particular point. Last year at the CES conference, Vanessa and I had a thematic breakfast and on the topic of independent consulting to ask if anybody was interested in pursuing this and getting more closely linked in some kind of a community of interest. And so, in fact, a lot of people suggested interest, and we got a working group together and we started putting together our terms of reference and planning the future, and it's gone really well. So we had 60 people who were members, and we've had a number more join at the most recent conference, which, as you may remember, was last week in Fredericton. And I hosted another thematic breakfast there, and there's quite a bit of interest. And so we're excited to be in a position now where we've put together a relationship with the CES board of directors. And so we're on a pilot project for a year as a community of interest. And there's one other which has also been established in teaching and learning. And I believe that this is an excellent new direction for CES to be taking, where we get to communicate more closely with other evaluators who are interested in the same things we are. Now, just very, very briefly, who are we? We're a group of individuals interested in mutual support and fostering community for those interested in independent evaluation consulting. And there are several objectives that we have. We want to share knowledge, and such as today, and best practices. We want to network and build professional relationships. We want to stay up to date with the latest trends. And when necessary, seek out mentorship and guidance from other independent consultants. Collaborate on evaluation projects. You may get a contract that's too big for you to handle yourself and you're looking for somebody else to work on it. We want to be the place for you to look. and also accessing new resources and tools that are coming up with relation to our professional growth and contribute to the field through mutual sharing of expertise. So that's what we hope to do. And membership is free. It's open to all CES members. And on this slide here, there is a link to a registration form, which we'd be thrilled if you'd fill it out. And you can also check our website, which is just getting set up, but at least you'll know where it is and come back to visit us soon. We are putting together plans for the future. In particular, our next event is going to be on June the 4th, and we're going to have a networking event as well as a chance to review and have our annual general meeting and start to make plans for the fall. So with that, I'll pass it on to our next speaker, which is Carolyn, and she is, of course, not with us today, but we're going to see her anyway. So thanks a lot for listening. There's no sound.
There's no sound.
Okay, I'll look into it. Let me start from the beginning. Let me know if there's sound.
There's
there sound?
There's sound, but it's very faint. Is there a way to turn it up?
Okay. Let's see if this is better, and then I'll start from the beginning. Let me know if it's better. How was that?
No, no.
Okay, just tried something else. Let me know.
No. It was working during our practice run 20 minutes ago.
No. So is the sound, you can't even hear it at all, like it's so low, or
So we've
okay.
got some suggestions coming in the chat, and it sounds like we might maybe benefit from if you close the presentation and share directly from the online video.
Close. Okay, so close the slides and share from the online video.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I've left the slides here, so I'm already. I've just closed everything now. Just go back into it here. Here's the video. Let's try that. And
thank you. My name is Carol Whistler.
did that not work?
Only for a second.
Okay, so if I kept playing it, would it have worked?
Try it again.
Okay.
If this doesn't work, can I suggest we move on to the next speaker and maybe Claire can work in the background?
Okay, I'll try it one more time.
Can I share my screen? I wonder if I try to share the video, would that help?
That's a good idea.
I'm just getting there. Sorry, I didn't have it open, but I should be able to do that very quickly.
Thank you, Gail. My name is Carolyn Hostler. I'm a consultant to hire. Thank you, Gail. My name is Carolyn Hostler.
So the sound was there.
Thank you, Gail. My name is Carolyn Hostler. I'm a consultant to Higher Education and Beyond. I'm one of the ICCI working group members. And I'm going to tell you about what is Gen AI and the guiding principles when using Gen AI. I'm based in Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis, but I'm currently with family for a funeral on the land, the Mississauga First Nations, called Adobeko, meaning where all the trees grow. What is Gen AI? So what is Gen AI? Gen AI is a thinking partner, a novice drafter, and idea generator. So generative artificial intelligence runs algorithms in the background, and what it does is it creates things like text, images, Excel formulas, code, formal documents, presentations, summaries, synthesis, audio, video, anything that we can code it to do. How we use it is it's a text-based chat window that we engage with. It's kind of like ordering something off a menu, but we would also order it off a chat conversation. I would like, tea hot, but we don't generate it quite yet in the physical form, but instead we generate it in the online form. So instead it would make a picture of our tea hot. It's an embedded feature that is in many software now, so you'll often see, oh, now with generative AI or Gen AI, and it comes in many different names. So one of the more common ones right now is ChatGPT, but there's many of them out there. It's an embedded feature. It's really a dynamic and bi-directional conversation with a feedback loop, which means when they get it not quite right, you get to give it feedback and it comes up with a better idea. Consider it a novice drafter. It is basically throwing spaghetti at a wall based on the most likely guess. So, because under the hood, it's algorithms that adapt and shift through large data sets sourced from the internet and written content and images provided by the software creators. It's a best approximation based on the prompts that you give it. The more detailed the prompts, the more likely it is to be accurate. So in today's session, we're going to focus on how evaluators, particularly independent consultants, can use AI. And we're going to have a range of varied levels of experience with AI. And we're here to share our experience in the hope that they may provide you with some food for thought. When we think about the guiding principles for using AI, the first one is our audience. We want to think about who we're going to be sharing it with, the results with, whose information is going into it, and we want to be making sure we're maintaining a relationship with our participants, our funders, and our clients. We want to think about how we're going to convey transparency, how we're going to ask for consent, how we're going to maintain trust, how we're going to check in whether or not the results of AI will be considered helpful, suspicious, credible, or bad. We also want to be thinking about data ownership, privacy, and confidentiality. Note that these are not guaranteed. They really depend on the product. They depend where the servers are. And some service agreements do allow for confidentiality and to maintain the content locally, and others will upload it and share it. So be really clear each time you use it. And if it's really important confidential information, always recheck the fine print because those agreements can change day to day. The other thing to note is that AI does draw on copyright work and other, particularly around art, but it does in writing as well. So it does draw on copyright work. So there is some issues around ownership in that way as well. The third principle is that AI doesn't know your context. So if you're writing for a particular audience, if you're writing for a particular level of formality, key terminology, who the author is, all of those things, you're going to have to tell it. Otherwise, it's just going to default to the norm. So if you ask it to write executive summary, it's going to pick some random context that is the most common one in its algorithm and write an executive summary in that context. That may not be appropriate for yours, so always think back to the context and tell it its prompts. it is going to be a conversational dynamic, so we can leverage it. It was built to be a therapeutic conversational dynamic, so you can have things like follow up for a request, say thank you, say please. It's note that each chat window contains the memory of the conversation. So if I'm asking for 3 different projects in the same window, it's going to assume they're part of one project. If I ask in a new window, it's going to assume it's an entirely new conversation. So it won't have memory across windows, but it will have memory within a window. The last one is we want to make sure we add an equity lens. Behind this recording, it points out that basically AI by default is missing an equity lens. It is by default pulling from humanities assumptions and biases. So when you say something like an engaging speaker, it's going to pick the most stereotypical option. There is some work being done in the back end on this, but note that you must add an equity lens when both reviewing the content and also when using your prompts.
Back to you, Claire.
Yep, I'll reshare the slides here. And put it in presentation mode. And Susan.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to begin by recognizing the land I'm currently sitting and living on as the unceded territories that were inhabited by the Jimanos, Wichita, Kickapoo, and Tawakoni peoples. And in addition to engaging in continuing exploration of the indigenous stewardship of the lands we live and work on, and the lands we visit, and an acknowledgement of the genocide and other atrocities perpetrated on Native Americans in the U.S., as a way of offering more than words, I've also made a donation to the Intertribal Community Council of Texas that supports and strengthens the local indigenous community. And I would like to suggest to people that we do that as an accompaniment to our land acknowledgements. Okay, so I'm going to talk about, next slide, about how you can get started if you haven't dipped your toes into the AI waters. And I'm asking you, just think baby steps. Okay, next slide. So I'm a new user. When it came out, I just didn't give it much thought, as there are so many other things that I've been working on continuing to learn about. I needed a clever workshop title, so I asked my business bestie, Ann Price, and she said I should try ChatGPT. And at that time, my 72-year-old husband was using it, so I felt like I kind of had to jump in and use it too. You know how that is. So I gave it a try. Next. Well, since I started using it to generate clever workshop titles and things like that, I've expanded it to add it to my cadre of personal assistants. I have Echo or Alexa to remind me when I have meetings or tell me about the weather. I have Hey Google to ask questions sometimes. And now I have ChatGPT as well. It generates clever titles. It shares, how you're sitting there and you need some stata code and you can't think of it, or an Excel function. It'll do that. It gives me book lists and provides easier and better answers than if I try to Google. So my husband actually used it to write his letter telling his company he was retiring. So apparently it writes really good letters. It was a great letter. Next slide. So here's an example of when I used it to generate stata code. I just said I need to compare two groups. The variable is called item 1n and the groups are defined by a variable called time. How do I write the stata code for this? And it gave me some different, different ways that I could do that. So that was really helpful because, sometimes you might write this code 1,000 times, but your brain blocks. And so you just go to ChatGPT. And here's an example of using it to generate a workshop title. Can you help me to write a title for a workshop? The topic is about engaging community, and the workshop would be for an audience of people interested in crimes against women. So there you go. It gave me 10 options. Oftentimes when I do this, next slide, please. Oftentimes when I do this, I end up looking at them and then it inspires me to put together something from a couple of them. So I don't always use the exact ones it offers, but it's good to help get the mind going. So moving forward, I plan to spread my wings and apply it to some other aspects of my work. And I'll see what works for me and what doesn't work for me. Even though it's exciting and kind of fun, I don't want to, I'll ease into it as I can. So don't, even though everybody's going on about it and using it for a lot of things, don't feel that pressure. Just ease in at your own pace and be okay with that. So some tips, just do it. Just log on and do it. Go to ChatGPT, Google it, it'll come up, go in, do it. Consider it to be another tool in your toolbox. Ask it questions. You can use it to verify information. You don't have it to do your work for you, but it can be like I say, I use it as sort of an additional assistant in my office right now. I may expand that in the future, but for now I'm good. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Harry Cummings now.
Hello, everyone. It's Harry Cummings here. I'm pleased to be part of this group talking about the role of AI in this quickly expanding field. And first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that I am on the land and territory of First Nations and Métis people that have occupied it for centuries. I acknowledge the responsibilities associated with that, my presence on these lands. Introduce myself a bit. I'm a retired professor from the University of Guelph, taught program evaluation for about 25 years, including 3 or 4 teams that went to the Canadian Evaluation Society competition. I do international consulting, NGO work with governments. My international work tends to be with the NGO community as well. And the subject matter is quite diverse: agriculture, social planning, health, agriculture. I mean, a variety of topics. So I'm using AI in all those fields. But like all of you, I'm relatively new at this, but I've had some what I feel very good success. Next slide. So one of my first applications of it was in writing an executive summary. So as an independent consultant, I write reports. I would say all of my reports require an executive summary of various lengths, usually from 1 to 5 pages, depending on the nature of the client and their hopes. I give ChatGPT a specific instruction to do the following: write a 2-page summary of the following text, including recommendations. I then import the text into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT very promptly delivers an executive summary. So to me, the next step is fundamental to all of this. I mean, I see AI as a research assistant, so producing material for my review. So once the draft material is prepared, if AI missed it badly, I will reissue the instruction using a more specific kind of phrasing. For example, is 2 pages too long or too short? Or the particular context that I'm working in, which was alluded to earlier by one of our presenters. So I will take that text, proofread it, correct it, add my own insights if there are thoughts missing, and make sure that I own the content. And then I will share that executive summary in the report. And at the front of the report, I'll acknowledge that I've used AI as a support for the generation of this work. Next slide. So another great application of this particular technology was in my development of research tools. So in this case, I'm referring to a key informant interview guide. So who doesn't do an evaluation where there are key informant interviews? So we can all use this, and developing a good guide is a fundamental part of it. So I write a specific instruction for ChatGPT, which would include the organization that I'm going to be working with, the nature of the interview, discovery interview, impact evaluation, indicate something about the desired length of the interview. ChatGPT then generates the interview guide, and I would review that guide for overall content to make sure that it's consistent with the assignment. Often regenerate the guide a second time using a more specific instruction with respect to topics that didn't get covered or issues that I think are important. I mean, a good one would be equity, diversity, equity, inclusion kinds of questions to make sure that they're included. So finally, proofread the interview guide, make it my own, and then share it with the client. Again, one of the principles I emphasize is informing the client that I am using artificial intelligence as a support / researcher to assist me in carrying out the work. Next slide. Generate boilerplate for a proposal. So boilerplate tends to be that we write many proposals every year. Let's say my company, 20 or 30 proposals a year. In all those proposals, you have to describe the firm, the strengths of the firm, your ability with various research tools in evaluation. And so this is repeated. I mean, there are always little tweaks to it every time. It's never exactly the same, but it's certainly an important part of doing a good proposal. So another good example would be that I did quite recently in part of another assignment. I mean, I preach the merits of mixed methods evaluation. I say to people, I mean, I taught at the University of Guelph for 20 years, and I would say to people it's best practice in doing good evaluation research. So I asked ChatGPT to summarize the merits of mixed methods evaluation. That gave me a first draft of a statement that I inserted into the work plan for this proposed evaluation. And then the final example here is ask ChatGPT to identify the characteristics of a good question in a survey. Because in your proposal, you're telling people how you develop your instruments. Many of your instruments involve questions which you're asking in some way or another in a focus group, question you're asking in an interview guide, or a question that you're asking in a survey. So all those are very common elements of our work as independent evaluators, doing good evaluation work and explaining to our clients what those characteristics are. Just as an add-on from this past week, I do some work in agriculture, and I'm doing a project on basil, that herb, and I said, describe the market for basil in southwestern Ontario. The ChatGPT produced a very nice summary in some insightful language, which I worked on and made it my own. Next. So in summary, this is what my experience has been. You need to be quite specific with the instruction. Page length, context, name of the organization. I think the more specific you are, the better the results are going to be. Be aware that your first version of the instruction may not produce the results you desire. So refine the initial instruction to make it more specific, to make sure it covers things that you think are missing. Finally, always make whatever is produced by AI your own by proofing it, contextualizing it, adding paragraphs, and making sure that the information provided is factual and accurate. And then finally, acknowledge that you're using ChatGPT or some artificial intelligence vehicle as part of your work, so that people are aware of the contributions that are coming to them and where they might have come from. So you have your research team as part of the independent evaluator, and you have in the background, I would say, SPSS and Vivo and ChatGPT as support software tools contributing to the evaluation. So I think that covers the major issues. I'll entertain questions at the end. I'd like to pass it on to Vanessa, who will speak about her experience using ChatGPT or other AI tools. Vanessa, take it over.
Thanks, Harry. So I'm Vanessa Anastasopoulos, and I'm based out of Montreal, which is the unceded territory of the Ktunaxa Nation. I've been an evaluator for 25 years, the last 6 of which have been as an independent consultant. And as an independent consultant with no staff, I often use AI as a brainstorming partner. So it's kind of like having access to a larger team that helps me expand my thinking or validate my work. Next slide. The first use of AI that I'm going to talk about can help you to generate ideas on how to grow your independent consulting business. I learned about this approach from a webinar delivered by Dr. Clickard, and then I tried it out. So first, I asked ChatGPT to look at my evaluation firm's website, vanistas.ca, and to identify 5 types of potential clients that might be interested in my particular services. And you can see the prompt that I used on the right side of the screen. ChatGPT's suggestions were pretty good. It described 5 types of potential clients of my services, 4 of which I could imagine myself working with, including one that I'd never thought of before but was interested in, which is a corporate social responsibility manager. Next slide. Then I asked the AI to provide me with ideas about how I might pitch my company's services to each of these 5 types of clients. Next slide. And as a final step, I asked ChatGPT for tips on how I could tailor my website to better appeal to these potential clients. And it generated lots of good suggestions for improving my website, some of which I intend to implement. So for fun, I then replicated the whole process using Microsoft Edge's Copilot, and the results were similar. However, a difference is that for each response provided, Copilot points you to specific websites where you can learn more, and it suggests follow-up prompts. So in this case, as I was asking about my evaluation firm, Copilot suggested the prompt, tell me more about Dr. Anastasopoulos, which is me, and so I couldn't resist that, and I clicked on it, and it turned out to be an interesting way to explore my independent consulting firm's online reputation. Next slide. I've recently started using AI to help me respond to RFPs in a number of ways, similar to Harry, but also a little different. So a really useful one, especially for large government RFPs, is to get a quick overview of it by feeding the PDF into ChatGPT 4.0 and asking it to summarize key information like the due dates, the budget, the mandate. And I do this even before I start to read the RFP, because it can help me quickly determine if it's aligned with my interests, my business model, my availabilities. Next slide. And even when we have a lot of experience in a certain domain, there's sometimes unfamiliar program-specific concepts or terminology in an RFP. So I asked the AI to tell me about them. Next slide. And then I asked ChatGPT to start developing the sections of my proposal that describe the mandate. So its text will always need to be reworked based on my own readings about the program, but this gives me ideas about how to frame the information. Next slide. Most recently, I've asked the AI to create project relevant images So I can create an image and put it on the cover page of my proposal, of course, making sure to reference the image appropriately. Next slide. I also use ChatGPT to get a second opinion, if you will, on various facets of my proposal or evaluation report writing. So I ask it to propose better phrasing, which is super useful if I'm struggling to think about how best to phrase something. And by the way, ChatGPT works great in both English and French. I ask it to convert my text to plain language so that it can be more easily understood by the reader. From an EDI lens, I ask it to check my implicit bias by verifying the words and expressions I've used to make sure they aren't inadvertently favoring or denigrating certain groups or perspectives. And lastly, I ask it to change the writing style, the level of detail, the length of the text to better target specific types of audiences. But I'm very selective about what text I'll upload because I'm not using Enterprise or another version like that. So I don't want, for example, my draft evaluation findings being used to train the AI. I'm only going to upload small sections of text that I'm going to strip of information that could identify the program, my clients, and respondents. Next slide. Last summer, I found myself in the sink or swim situation of having to analyze way more qualitative data than had been budgeted for. So with my client's approval, I turned to AI to support my data analysis process. And I admit that I had to climb a steep learning curve, but it worked out. And since then, I've used AI for other projects. So one of my main takeaways is that AI-assisted data analysis introduces some efficiencies. But the largest benefit is the potential to enhance the quality of my analyses. So I'll give you some use examples. I happened to already use the software MaxQDA to analyze my qualitative data, and they introduced AI Assist, which, for example, provides brief summaries of qualitative data from interviews, surveys, and even documents. I used the summary feature at the start of my analysis to get a quick sense of what respondents said before even diving into the details and forming my own interpretations. Far more I think we're on the right slide. Far more interesting to me is MaxQDA's ability to identify categories or themes that emerge from the qualitative data. So I still read through the raw data and come up with my own ideas about what themes emerge. But as an extra step in my analytic process, I then ask MaxQDA to tell me what themes it identifies. And for each theme, it also provides a bulleted list of examples from the data to contextualize that theme. So comparing the themes that I identified with those that it identified, I'd say it does a decent job. Most of the time, our themes are quite similar. On occasion, it comes up with something that doesn't make sense to me. But what's most useful is that sometimes it actually proposes good emergent themes that I hadn't considered. And this is a good example of what I mean when I say that AI is like having access to a larger team. Like working with more junior evaluators, the AI requires supervision, so I can't blindly accept everything that it proposes, but it also helps me brainstorm, and ultimately that improves the quality of my analysis. And as an added perk, MaxQDA lets you regenerate as many times as you want, which is like getting multiple opinions from a slew of team members. I've also identified a few technological limitations. One of which is that I can't see the outliers, those pieces of information shared by only a few people that offer an important alternate perspective. So this brings me to another way that I've used AI to analyze qualitative data, which is to code the data thematically. Next slide. I did this by linking my data in Google Sheets to ChatGPT through a secure API, which also ensures that I'm the only one who can access my data. And that was the hardest part. I had to get help from a friend. Then I just had to give the AI the themes that I wanted to use to code my data. And just like any other Excel or Google Sheets function, I did this at the top of the column of data, and then I dragged it down to apply to the functions to the cells below. I did spend time validating the AI's coding and refining my prompt in an iterative way. And in the end, I'd estimate that it coded about 80% of the data well, which was actually fine for my purposes because I wasn't trying to quantify my qualitative analysis. My main goals were achieved, which were to make sure that the themes I had identified accurately reflected the data, to find representative quotes that I could include in a report, and importantly, to look for missing themes, the outliers. So I asked the AI to flag any data that didn't match the existing themes, and this produced a short list of data that I could review to understand what thoughts had been shared by only a few respondents. And by the way, the cost of the API to analyze a survey of over 1,000 respondents was a mere $2.51. So I'm going to stop here, next slide. But I wanted to let you know that the slides that we're going to be sharing after the webinar are going to provide a little more technical information for those who are interested. Next slide. There's a slide on how to identify emergent themes. Next slide. One on how to code your data, which we would probably need a much longer workshop to fully explain. Next slide. And lastly, I've included info about Max QDA and API privacy policies. On to you, Ted.
Thanks, Vanessa. I'm Ted Weicker, coming to you today from the lands of the unceded territory of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Squamish, and the Musqueam. I'm a bit of an interloper, and we're not, I guess, technically an independent contractor, but we have been in the past. Slavica and I started basically just the two of us 4 years ago. We're up to about 40 some people, I think, active on projects right now. We've got, I would say, most of the contractors we work with, which is about half of our staff, are independent contractors. So I think we've got a pretty good feel of kind of where people are. I'm going to focus a little bit different than Harry and Vanessa have done. I think we're trying to accomplish the same things, but we're probably doing it a little bit different ways. I think the ways that they're using it are excellent. We've really jumped on board AI. We are, I often say I'm really excited by it. It's more than I'm consumed by it. I think we spent a lot of time and money, probably. It's our year end right now. I think we're probably somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000 we've invested so far in it. So it's big. And so I'm going to give you a bit of an idea of kind of what we've done with that and kind of where we are. And happy to chat anytime anybody wants to talk about AI. I'm super excited to do that. If we can move on to the next slide. So the way that we look at AI is kind of two different ways. So we have the occasional tasks, which are things that you do periodically. We also call that the front end. And so pretty well everything you've heard so far, other than the last example by Vanessa, is really around a front end. It's around an occasional task. Harry wants to produce an executive summary or write a key informant interview guide. You just use it, wonderful for that. Vanessa wants to do a little background on an RFP or kind of upload an RFP and get it to do a summary of it. Great to do that. So ChatGPT, DALL-E 2, Midjourney, in video, I think, is an important tool. Microsoft Copilot kind of has two levels. It has the one that's attached to Edge. You can also pay another $450 a year for a single-use license on which I did, and I hardly use it. So it really depends where you're coming from. For me, it really hasn't been a good. Nobody has mentioned Perplexity so far, and I think Perplexity is an amazing tool. If you're looking for the answer to anything and getting it in more detail than ChatGPT is going to give it to you. It runs on ChatGPT, but it's a wonderful tool. So just as an aside comment. So really what gets us excited is the automating of the processes. So what we've really done is we've taken a step back and said, okay, what do we actually do? What is our sales process? What is our research process? What are all the steps that are involved in that process? And where can we interject AI into that process to make it better? And really what we're trying to do is we're trying to develop scripts that we can reuse over and over and over again. So we automatically use AI every day within our work. It's just built into some of our processes. And so the two areas that we focus most heavily on initially is first the sales process, because I'm not very concerned about privacy. I'm much less concerned about accuracy. If we get something wrong in an RFP, we don't win the project. We're not recommending that clients do something dramatically different than what they should be doing. So we started there and allowed us to really understand kind of what AI can do, what it can't do, spend a lot of time kind of focusing on that. At the same time, we were running a bunch of research projects. We did things through running scripts versus coding manually, and just to see how we do, kind of what does it do well, what does it not do well, but not really doing anything to the point now. So we're to the point now where we're starting to go back and look at that research function and say, okay, how are we embedding in it? So we've developed a series of tools, which if you're a member of our platform, you can actually go in and use. Very few people do, but we have kind of our quote older tools, which means they're about a month old, online while we work on the next generation. The next generation is pretty amazing, but I'll talk a little bit about that, but it's really on the research side. If you want to jump on to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about those. I think before I get into describing what we're doing on the sales side and on the research side, maybe I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we've learned. And so they kind of are a bit of a predicate for understanding kind of what it can do, what it can't do. So I think the one thing you learn pretty quickly with OpenAI and with Claude is that it's a prediction technology. It predicts the best answer that it can give you, or occasionally it tells you it can't answer the question. But it's wrong. It's wrong depending on what the application is. If you haven't really well defined the context, it's wrong 75% of the time, probably, or 50% of the time, sorry. If you do a really good job of defining the context, giving it very clear instructions of, we can go through the hierarchy of the context later if you're interested. If you do a really good job, it's probably correct 75 or 80% of the time. So we work a lot on trying to get, how do we get from 80 to 85? How do we get from 85 to 90? That's a big part of kind of what we're doing. The thing that's most dramatic about it, the thing that turned my light bulb on a year ago when we started working, is that software development is not a major barrier. So we have it sitting beside our two software developers that we have on staff now. And they do coding, but the thing that makes it unique is that you can do so much of the coding yourself using it. The one thing that AI is it's an amazing coder. So even if you don't have a coding background, you can ask it to write code for you. You can ask it to install it. It'll run it. It's pretty amazing. A few other comments really around prompt engineering. That's really what the key is in terms of being able to make it work effectively. So if we talk about the things that we've really built, they're mostly around prompts and around telling it what kind of outputs we want to get out of things, how we want to present the information we get. We do a lot of fine tuning. So that word may mean something to some people, but it means a lot to us. Agents are a big thing that's coming. So agents mean that if you notice earlier, I said we have one process and another process and another process. We broke our sales into a whole series of functions. So the idea of an agent is it'll do the entire thing. You started at the beginning, it produces a proposal at the end, sends it out, and then you're waiting for the contract from the client, kind of thing. And so that's the idea behind an agent, is it ties things together. The challenge is that when things are wrong, if you're only 85% confident at each step of that process, you just multiply 85% by 85% by 85%, you know by the end of that process, you're ending up with garbage, right? And so the key in using AI is to validate, kind of going through. So validate is a big issue. Privacy is a big issue. Bias is a big issue. Those are all kind of key things. And so the other things to keep in mind that we're really aware of is because we're building apps, we want to be really cognizant what our role is. We are not a software developer. We are not developing software to sell to somebody else. We are developing what we call last mile software, which will take the capabilities of these things, which are amazing, and tie them directly into our processes so we can understand, we can really utilize that to its benefit. The other big thing is they get better all the time. So there was announcements. We had GPT 4.0 announced on Monday. So we're doing some upgrades right now to our software. Well, we won't incorporate that yet because we want to compare kind of our upgrades to what we had before and see what the difference is. But as soon as it is, we'll slot in kind of the new one. So it's constantly changing. The capabilities are constantly changing. So that's one other thing to comment on. So let's go into a couple of examples here of kind of what we're doing. So if we go on to the next slide. So as I mentioned, one of the first things we did was automate the sales process. So if you look at the sales process, what do? Vanessa gave us a bit of background on it, right? So you got to get the RFP, you got to look at the RFP. Is this something I'm really interested in? In our case, we share the RFP. If you're a member of our platform, you can go into our thing and look at any of the RFPs we're looking at right now. We got to make a bid decision. We got to decide what are our priorities for this week. We want to develop a proposal outline. We got to develop teams. We got to develop content. We want to review and submit the proposals. And so what we've done is basically all the way along. So some of these things are more traditional software. Some of them are completely AI. So we harvest data, which is really around more of a traditional crawler, where we go and find it. So we download 6,000 RFPs a month right now. So it's massive. There's no way we could go through all of these things. And these are things that meet our criteria, right? So they're not things, we're not talking about things that are, architectural studies or something, or other. There's things that potentially we could be interested in. So we use AI completely to prioritize it. They go through them and say, based on our history of things, we like this, we don't like this. It goes through and it categorizes them. So we get down from that down to probably under 1,000. Then we need to go through and prioritize again and find the ones that we're actually going to post. So like what Vanessa does is she uses ChatGPT to summarize the RFP. So we do that. We call it cleaning, and then we actually post it on our site for our members of our platform. They can go in and take a look at them. Lots of information on that. We need to make a bid decision. We got to the point where we're developing proposal outlines, but within 2 years, I think we're following up on kind of Vanessa's lead, and we're actually writing proposals based on, so we'll have our database of information. We've got, I don't know, 1,500, 2,000 proposals we've written historically through my various firms. And we'll use that combined with the RFP to basically answer the questions that need to be answered in the RFP and put it in. So everything needs a human touch all the way along, but the machine can really help in kind of moving it together, putting together project teams and so on. So that's the sales side. So we're really good up to the bid decision. Proposal outline works, but I know when we finish our work and research, we double back to that, we're going to make it way better. But that's kind of where we are right now. So if we go on to the next slide is kind of, we've been focusing mostly on the production side. So it's very similar to, I think, some of the things you're probably doing. So if you look at the beginning, so if you look at, you're producing data, right? So either client is giving us data, we're getting secondhand data, or we're collecting data through interviews, through focus groups, through surveys. We have a bunch of data. And so if that's in transcripts, we go through and we clean the data. So which is really, we take a 60-page document, we reduce it down to about 7 or 8 pages without really losing any of the substantial content. We take out a lot of ums and ahs and people's names being repeated multiple times, time after time. So as a way to kind of condense it down, Then we can summarize it if we want for an individual interview. We played with trying to take that, break it up into questions by asking questions of the transcripts and putting it into an Excel. We can do thematic analysis. I think it's amazing with thematic analysis if the data pool is large enough. If you've got a small data pool, you're going to have problems because it's going to come up with themes. If it can't find it in the data, it's going to find it somewhere in its training data. So that is great. We're building a literature reviewer right now because we got a massive literature review to do. We'll see how. I've got Sam right beside me who's kind of busy working on that right now. Survey Summarizer is something, again, you can go on, take a look at it on our site, but basically the one that we demoed on Tuesday, which is not a live version, was just, again, just kind of knocked my socks off. So we took a live survey. So we're doing a survey of municipalities in Ontario. So we took that data, we put it into our system, which the API system went up and through it and ran it and produced a technical report in under a minute, like a 25-page technical report, fully formatted tables. We have text around the tables. We've got headings. We've got a thematic analysis. If it's open-ended question, does it need work? Yeah, you still got to go through it. It's a really first draft by a really junior consultant kind of thing, but it's amazing what it can do. This thing is just amazingly powerful. So that's part of that report writing. Survey administrator, we've been working with a company in Sweden that's developing avatars to administer surveys. So it's kind of neat in that they're so engaging that people are actually responding to them. They can switch languages, they can switch accents really easily. Long term, I don't think that's the way to go. I think for us, we're trying to figure out some way to make the surveys more interactive. So based on what your response was, we'll adapt the question to follow up. So again, I don't think we're very far away from that. And guide development, something that Harry talked about, which I think what we've done there is we, again, just tested it. We're not using it. If we give it a series of data fields that we want out of it, give it some sense of how we want those questions structured, are they yes, no, are they Likert scale or whatever, can it actually produce a survey instrument? And yes, it can, but again, needs more work. So the one thing, we got more ideas than time at this point. So we're spending a lot of time kind of bouncing around. So if we jump to the next slide, I don't know how I'm doing on time. I could talk for 2 hours on this stuff. I just love it. So if you're an independent consultant, okay, so one of the questions we're trying to do is tie it back, right? So how can you get involved in it? The first thing is I think what was set off the front, it's absolutely essential that people get involved in this. You need to understand AI. It changes what we do, how we do it, who does it. I think AI is absolutely critical to understand as you're going through. So there's lots of large language models out there. We are an open AI shop. I saw a question coming in about open AI versus Claude. We don't care at this point, right? We're not going to spend our time comparing these two different models because we're confident even if Claude moved ahead of OpenAI briefly, we don't care because OpenAI is going to move ahead of Claude pretty soon as well. So we're just picked a horse, we're riding the horse, but there's lots of them out there. I would encourage people, if you have it all kind of a coding bent, to try and develop your own applications. It's amazing what a simple application can do. Something that you can write in 20 minutes and apply for a specific use case, right? So you do need to have a paid subscription with OpenAI, which allows you to use the APIs, right? But I'd recommend that people, as much as they can, use APIs anyway, because the security, privacy is so much better on that side than anything on the front end, which worries me. So in terms of software, there's two kinds of software that are being developed. There's the NVIDIAs of the world and probably SurveyMonkey, although I haven't seen anything. People who have a very traditional way of doing it, and they're trying to tack on AI on top of it, not necessarily that effectively. but they're trying to do that. But they still have the model that's based on historically what they've done, rather than kind of starting from scratch and say, okay, what does this allow us to do? And so definitely better to have AI than not have AI. Whether they're actually going to be around in 5 or 10 years, I don't know. The other thing are companies like Coloop, which is kind of an interesting company. And so it does qualitative analysis. Again, I wouldn't invest in it. It's in a really competitive market going forward, but it allows you to do some qualitative analysis. I think it's great that it allows you to do some stuff, but it's from a business perspective, it's the fact that it is so easy to code, to get it to do. So are you willing to pay, I don't know, I can't remember what a user license was, 6,000 or something, or are you willing to pay $6,000 to get access to this thing, when for a few $100s you could probably produce something that's, you know, 90% as good of it, and probably more tailored to what your situation is. The last thing is really around working with Catalyst. So I'm trying not to sell Catalyst, but we do work with a lot of associates. Part of our value proposition is we share our tools. We share our proposals, we share our RFPs, we share our if you're interested in sharing your name with other consultants, we do that, and we're developing a whole series of tools. We're trying to build a bit of a community. We don't want to compete against the independent consultants, but we're to some degree doing a little bit of the same thing. So that's an option for you as well. And at this point, I'll turn it back to Gail.
Well, I'm so excited about all these ideas. They're just pinging around in my head. And I have to apologize because I was so excited to get started that I didn't introduce myself or do my land acknowledgement. So I'm Gail Barrington, and I live and work on this Treaty 7 territory here in Calgary, which is the home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina and the Stoney Nakoda, and the Métis Nation Region 3. And just to say that I humbly acknowledge my responsibility to know the truth about the harm that has been done and continues to be done to Indigenous people. And I commit to moving forward in a spirit of partnership and reconciliation. And just to add to that, to say that when my colleague and I were writing our text, Evaluation Time, a practical guide to evaluation, we definitely worked with that in mind and tried to bring the Indigenous story a bit forward in a way that it hasn't been before in a textbook. At any rate, I want to return to the topic of our independent consulting community of interest, just to tell you that we do have an event planned for June the 4th. Now, it's not quite posted yet, but should be very soon. And that would be a good chance to start to get to know the community better and to network with more people. And then we're setting up our program for the fall, and I'm going to be doing a workshop on pricing, which I know is always the #1 topic for independent consultants. So I'll look forward to seeing a number of you there as well. So register, make sure you sign up, and we'll get to know you better. So with that, I'll hand it back to Claire.
Thank you, everyone. So much information, and even more information has been going into the chat. And I feel like a whole other webinar was happening in the chat. So what we will do is save the chat and also send that to everyone as well, because there was discussions about like ChatGPT Scholar, using Mind Studio to develop evaluation tools and how apps can be a good use. Using AI within apps is also an option, and so much more. And just questions about which AI tools are better or compare to each other. So we will send you all of that. And I see some questions are still coming in, but we had some questions throughout the webinar as well that I will share. One, before we getting into EI was, will this video recording be shared? And it will be as well. So you'll get the slides, the video, and the chat. And so some of the questions were answered a little bit in the Q&A, but I thought it might be good to open them up to all the panelists. So one of the first ones is when you ask AI to generate information about a topic, like Harry's example about basil market in Ontario, doesn't fact-checking that content for hallucinations take as much time as doing the research yourself in the first place? I know, Harry, you said it doesn't, because you have someone check the draft. If you want to elaborate on that, but if anyone else has a response, please go ahead.
I'm just going to quickly jump in and say maybe we don't need to continue sharing the screen.
Okay, sure. And I'll also put the question in the chat box as well, in case anyone wants to see it. So I'll do that, and then I'll stop the question when you want.
So Harry here, the topics that I would go to ChatGPT for are topics that I am already well informed in, and I can normally in a quick scan get a sense for whether in fact the information is relevant or not. If there are specific facts, then I would go back and check the sources myself. But normally I'm not using ChatGPT to generate specific facts. I'm using it to contextualize a problem or represent a situation.
Ted, did you have something to add?
There we go. Just a couple of experience things that we have. One is I'm always nervous about doing large-scale literature review of literature that we do not own, right? So it's one thing if you've actually gone and find the reports, then if you kind of upload them into the system, they'll give you a great summary. You can go back to it. The exception is probably Perplexity, which again, I'll kind of push. So it's a little bit like either Bing or ChatGPT on steroids a bit. So it'll do a really nice summary of the market for basil in Ontario, and it'll also identify. It'll give you very clear links on where it's getting the data. So it's so much easier to go back and validate. So I think it really is a useful product. So Google had its big conference on Tuesday. They announced kind of a competitor to it. I think they're calling it Google Overviews or something or other, which should be out in a while. I'm assuming it looked a lot like the Perplexity user interface. So I think they're going right after Perplexity.
Vanessa?
Oh, that's okay. I was actually going to say something similar, so we can pass on to the next question.
Sounds good. So this was a kind of one more about privacy that I know we've touched upon, but in case in the chat now, how safe is it to copy reports into ChatGPT that have not yet been approved or published? So Harry had said he doesn't put reports in with confidential items. If you want to add anything, Harry, or anyone else. Ted, I see your hand up.
Yeah, there are a couple of issues to kind of keep in mind. So anything you put in the front end, unless you specifically identify it not to go into training data, it goes into training data. So that's a real concern about it. So if you're using an API, you're uploading it through the back door, it does not go into training data. You can delete the information that you've uploaded. So far, so great. The one downside is the servers are almost for sure Microsoft servers. which are based somewhere in the United States. So it is subject to the Patriot Act. So if that's a concern, I don't think anybody's ever going to go and look for the kind of reports we're uploading, but they are residing probably in the United States somewhere.
Vanessa, is your hand
Yeah,
up?
I'll just add to that, that as Carolyn mentioned in her video at the beginning, I think it's important to go back and regularly check what the privacy policies are for different tools, because they might be one thing one day and then change with the next iteration. So if you think that, okay, I'm using an API and it's safe now, well, maybe it will always be safe, but just make sure that you continuously are informed of that. And then, as I mentioned earlier in my portion of the presentation, I don't, for that reason, I won't give it, here's my draft report, or even here's a paragraph from my evaluation findings. I will actually strip it of any identifying information beforehand, because I'm using ChatGPT 4.0. In this case, I haven't yet figured out how to do it with an API. That's coming next. And so I am very careful to just not put anything identifying in there.
Thank you. And because we wanted to leave so much time for questions, we didn't spend a lot of time on the slide, but it will be sent to you. There was a slide of useful AI guidelines that are links to documents to help you, and keeping up to date on YouTube podcasts. Ted, that was your slide. Did you want to say anything about that while we're on the topic?
Sure. So in there's a couple of different kind of government, I think one university, one government document guidelines. Those are going to change pretty dramatically over time as we begin to understand what it can do and what it can't do. The other slide, that's not the page. There we go. The other thing are really just some YouTubes and podcasts. So I seem to listen incessantly to something or other on the way to work, on the way back to work, whatever. There are some really good ones. I mean, Matt Wolf is a wonderful guy in terms of keeping you completely up to date with what happened last week. Cognitive Revolution can be an hour, 2 hours in length, has, the heads of the different large language model organizations coming in, or selected experts on particular things, and they really give you an idea of kind of what are some of the key issues, what are the struggles, what are the expectations. So one of the things I learned, just to give you an idea, first language model cost about $1 million, the ChatGPT-2. The next one was 10 million. The ones that are being developed right now are about $1 billion. Andronics is Claude. They're budgeting 5 to 10 billion for the next one. Google has announced an expectation that the model it'll be developing by the end of the decade is going to cost $100 billion. And so one of the things that's happening is what AI did, which recognized that others didn't recognize, is that these things get exponentially better as you add more data into them. And at this point, there's no indication that that curve is becoming an S curve, that it's slowing down. And so we just are moving to bigger and bigger and bigger models. It's quite amazing. Anyway, so that's the kind of thing they talk about. Last week in AI, it's just kind of a long version of kind of what happened. Andy Stapleton's he's a prof in the UK. He's great if you're really interested in more formal literature reviews or postdoctoral theses or doctoral thesis. Great idea. Walks you through tools, very engaging. Every is one of these many things that just shows you, brings in guests who just talk about how am I using AI, and some really interesting stuff come out of that. But there's a lot of them. There's a lot of really good podcasts out there, and YouTube, kind of recurring YouTube videos, which are really good.
Thank you. And I see more have been put into the chat. And I also see the conversation happening around the importance of telling your clients if you're using AI and maybe asking for consent. So I'm wondering if that is something anyone would like to comment on, if you're doing it, if how you're doing it, that type of thing. Vanessa?
I think it depends what you're using it for. So when I had to do data analysis, and it's still new to us, right? Using AI for data analysis, even though I was using an API, and then I was using Max QDA, and I knew nobody's going to have access to this information. It's still sort of a new approach. So I chose to get agreement from my client in order to be able to move forward with that before doing it. And in both, my clients were tended to be very open to that, but I had not been working with the federal government on that particular front, so that might depend on the client and their requirements. Yeah, if I'm using it to help me phrase a sentence better, I don't feel the need to go ask my client, can I do that? I've stripped it of information. I'm just helping, if I want it to help me make sure that my language is unbiased and I've stripped it of information, like, why would I go ask my client or tell my client that I've done that? I could have turned to any number of other tools, including, I don't know, like words automated fill-in suggestion of the rest of the sentence as a rudimentary example to be able to help me do that. So yeah, I would say if you're using it for something where their data is could be loaded into AI, even if it won't be shared, then I would explain that. And as Ted pointed out, the really important thing is for some clients is where that data is being stored. So
thank you. I think you led into a question that's appeared twice already, is how and if you're using AI to help proofread, edit, structure any of the language elements. So Vanessa, you said you can elaborate on that, or if anyone else is, please.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the presentation, I've been doing that a lot.
Yeah.
When I can't think of the right way to phrase something, when I'm writing, like I found that it works really well in French, and so sometimes I just want it to just make sure, because is there an anglicism in the way that I'm saying something? When I want to make sure that I can target a certain grade level. So if I say, please propose revisions to this text in a different grade level. And I should mention that DeepL now has started moving in that direction too. So a lot of people are familiar with using DeepL for straight translation, but now I think it's a beta version, so it's only available in English and German. But you can go into DeepL and have it tell it what type of revision you want. So I want this to be catchy. I don't remember what the options are. I want this to be for an academic audience, and it will propose revisions to your text accordingly.
Thank you. Another question that was touched upon in Carolyn's part as well was how you deal with bias in AI reporting that we know is happening. Is anyone? Vanessa?
I'm aware of the fact that actively they are trying, for example, with ChatGPT or Copilot, they're trying to work on ways to eliminate the bias, and that's great. But I put it into my prompt. So, for example, here's a silly example. I wanted to develop the image for the cover page of my proposal, and the topic was aging in community. So in prompt that I put into this, I said, please, provide an image of older adults sitting by a pond on a sunny day in a community park, and make sure that these adults are ethnically diverse and have different levels of abilities. So I tried to sort of feed it what I needed to see so that it didn't just make everybody a white male, for example.
Okay, thank you. Our last question, but please, we still have some time if anyone else has more questions to add, was directed towards Ted and was wondering if your company has developed a set of principles, guidelines, or policies for using Gen AI.
Yeah, we have. So we're having a retreat next week, kind of as an organization, and it's one of the things we're going to go over. But it's really a work in progress, kind of as you keep going along. So somebody had mentioned about telling clients. So we're on the edge of really starting to promote the fact that we are heavily into AI, that we have these capabilities. And as part of that, we need to make it really clear, okay, how do we deal with privacy? How do we deal with how do we deal with validation? How are we confident that what we're producing is actually accurate? So we're spending a lot of time doing that. We spend a lot of time testing internally in different areas. And that's kind of the challenge in terms of, from our perspective, in terms of developing the scripts or the GPTs or whatever the heck you want to call them. Is really around the tweaking. Tweaking takes forever in terms of trying to figure how do you make this better? And so it forces us to really go through and being able to assess, being able to validate. And then, so the next implication for us then is we need a set of processes internally. Okay, so when you run this data, this is the process through which you validate it. And so part of that validation is just making sure you really understand the data set. So one of the things we do is when we have a data set, we'll run that data in about 4 or 5 different ways. And so allow people to see, so kind of how it's coded differently in different places. So it's amazing how well that works in helping you understand kind of what people are saying. We also have ways that it can summarize the individual responses. One of the features we've developed in the previous version, which works even better in the new survey summarizer, is when it'll go through and count. So it'll code and it'll count and it'll tell you which cases it has assigned to that. And so right now you just click on the output on the little number, it says number 11, and it'll bring up that cell. So you can actually see what was there and go through and make changes. So everything it's not just, we're not just trying to automate the creation of things. We're trying to automate much of the validation and then try and figure, okay, where does the human co-pilot fit into that process? How does that work best? So from my perspective, it's just fascinating. It's just, this is going to extend my career, I think, another 10 years. I am so invigorated about this. It's amazing.
That's so great to hear. And I think that two more questions have appeared in the Q&A. And one of them, I think, kind of is a good follow-up, Ted, and for everyone, because it sounds like what developing all of this is a lot of work. So one of the questions that I'll put in the chat as well was someone said, I'm curious how anyone has adjusted their business model or pricing to account for the increased efficiencies or increased overhead associated with using tools with cost developing in-house. And Vanessa's hand went up right away. So maybe you can start us off.
I think that this is sort of related to another comment that I saw in the chat from Neil about the risks to independent consultants. Is this a risk? And so maybe I can sort of tackle both. So far, and I'm not using this in an automated way. I'm using this on a case-by-case basis based on my particular needs. And as I mentioned, I don't think that it saves me a little bit of time for sure, but a little bit. It also adds time because often, I'm very particular. I don't know a lot about this. I'm learning about it. So there's a learning curve. And then after that, I'm going to still want to read all the data because that's just me. I want to read, like if I've got like, 20 interviews, I'm going to read every single one of those. And come up with my own ideas about what themes are emerging from the data, and then ask the AI what themes it thinks are emerging. And so it's an added step that increases the quality of my work, but it's not saving me time. It's almost like an extra thing that I'm doing now. So eventually maybe that'll change in the world that Ted is talking about, where everything becomes automated and we don't have to do as much of that anymore. But right now I'm loving the fact that I can, and it doesn't yeah, like I don't feel that I need to change my pricing for anything, because if anything, it's taking me maybe sometimes a little more time, sometimes a little less. And then for is it a risk to independent consulting? My sense so far is a tentative no, because I think it's just an added tool that helps us make our work better, the quality of our work better so far. The one area that concerns me is how, like, you have to have the knowledge and the skills to be, perhaps a more senior evaluator, to be able to take what the AI is telling you and have a critical analysis of that and decide for yourself what's working and what's not, and what needs to be modified based on what it's spitting out for you. And so that you still need to go through all the training that you would as an independent consultant to be able to get to that point. But yeah, I don't see it as taking away from my potential to have an income. I'll stop there.
Thanks. So just
maybe
looking at the time, we do
maybe if I can jump in for a second.
Yeah, I was just going to say we have a minute left, Ted and Harry, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. So from our perspective, definitely it's reduced our profit margins. There's no question. We haven't gone back to clients to try and charge them more, because we're doing things two different ways. One thing it has done is it's really forced us to focus on growth. I mean, we need to grow our firm because we're making this investment. These tools are available to other people. We need to share them across a broader platform. So there's no question. So as a bit of a plug, Catalyst is doing a webinar next Thursday, I think, which really talks about how we work with associates. So if people are interested, go to our website and sign in, and we'll walk through. There's also a webinar on our site, which we did, how we're using AI. So we did a kind of an hour-and-a-half long webinar, I think, a couple of months ago. It's dated because things are moving so quickly. But really the key thing from the perspective, I think it's a disruptor. So if you're thinking you're going to be doing evaluations the same way in 10 years that you are today, you're going to be disrupted. So you need to find a way to be able to leverage AI to make use of it. There's lots of ways that can play out. I think it's going to help people who are kind of the senior evaluators. We need really wise people. It's a little bit more painful for what we call the legs, the people who actually kind of run around, collect data. I think it's going to have more of an impact there. But the people who understand data, understand analysis, understand kind of report writing, understand the needs of their clients, understand the context in which all of this stuff is happening, there's still going to be a lot of value there.
Thank you. Harry, last comment.
Yes, just a quick comment. Of course, the cost of doing work is adjusted for AI. My proposal reflects how much time it'll take to do the work. And if the time required is reduced by AI, then I'm going to bill at the reduced rate. If it's increased by AI and the report is better, then I'll bill at the increased rate. And most of my work is fixed price work. So the bid reflects what I end up getting paid for doing the work.
Thank you, everyone. that brings to an end our webinar for today. I'll just reshare this quickly. I know you'll get it emailed to you, but here's our information if you want to join ICCI. Thank you to all our panelists, such a diverse experiences, so much knowledge, so wonderful to hear from all of you, and great conversation at the end. Great questions at the end. Thank you so much. And yes, we will be in touch with all of the follow-up slides, chat, and everything video soon. Thank you so much. Take care.